So yeah, hi, I'm Mateusz.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
Hi, I'm Justyna. When the idea for this presentation, was conceived, we were all working for SAP Hybris. Currently, Basia and I still work there, and Mateusz enjoys new duties in Braintribe in Vienna.
So, why are we giving this presentation? So, the topic of today's SOP event is problem solving, and we basically want to take you on a journey from Confluence to DITA CMS and show you how our documentation department dealt with the problems we had.
So if you're considering moving from Wiki to DITA, you might want to listen up closely. And as far as the structure of our presentation is concerned, I will tell you about what was the motivation behind our move. Justyna will tell you about more of the technicalities of the move, and Basia will tell you about how our life looked like after the big move. So given that we're one of the first to present, we figured we won't bore you with the technicalities from the very beginning. So this thing on, not this here. So ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to introduce a bit of storytelling to our presentation. And fellow writers, we present you Confluence, the love story. So imagine you're back at high school. Pretty cool, huh? You could do everything different. We were all young at some point. And while at high school, you meet this other person, your crush. You have a crush on them. You start hanging out. You hold hands for the first time, maybe even do some other things. And then, bam, you're in a relationship with that person. Everything is peachy because actually you're in high school and you don't really know any better, right? However, inevitably, time goes by. And as time goes by, you start to realize that the very things that drew you together to that other person now start to piss you off. And that's what happened to the documentation department at SAP Hybris. The product we were working on has outgrown the platform it was hosted on. And by the product, I mean both the documentation we created and the product itself. We were used to doing, I think, 3 releases a year. But then the company has undergone major changes, and so did the product, and we find ourselves having to release 4 times a year. I'm talking about major releases, plus I think about 3 minor releases, you know, like bug fixes and stuff. And when you have 7 releases a year, you really need to have proper versioning in place, because the solution we had at the time, which was simply to indicate which section of a document applies to which version, it didn't work anymore. With 7 releases, imagine you have a page that's valid for 7 releases. You have 7 different sections about the same thing. It's a mess of a page. You won't find a single thing which can actually help you if you're looking for some information. Confluence didn't have versioning. And if 7 releases was not enough, the product we were working on has become more granular in nature. Namely, several modules were being released independently to the whole product. What that meant for us was independent documentation releases. So not only did we have to do 7 releases of the whole documentation suite, but also the independent releases. When we were doing that, we quickly noticed that we, in fact, duplicate much of the content. And I think you could agree with me on this. It's technical writing 101, right? If you can, reuse. So we started doing reuse. Confluence, however, can only get you so far in terms of reuse. I mean, yeah, we did use the out-of-the-box functionality that Confluence provides, namely the excerpt macro and metadata, was it? Yeah? But the thing is, you can only have 1 excerpt macro per page, so not much of a reuse. Plus, the metadata macro produces, first of all, it uses Wiki markup, which is deprecated. And then it produces mess on the page when you want to edit it. So Confluence, reuse in Confluence is not really the enterprise solution you're looking for. with each passing week, we identified more and more issues with our significant other. And I'm not going to focus on all of them. I'm just going to tell you about the 4 top issues which we found most annoying. Issue number 1, search, or lack thereof. Who has used Confluence at some point of their career? Raise your hands. Okay. Who of you thinks that the search mechanism provided by Confluence is working okay? My point exactly. Oh, I saw like a half a hand. Yeah, it is terrible. The thing is, our documentation set consisted of over 10,000 documents. With 10K documents, you really need to have proper search. Otherwise, it's virtually impossible to find the information you're looking for. Issue number 2, broken links. I said a minute ago that we are doing reuse, right? Using all these macros. The thing is that when you have too many macros on the page, sometimes Confluence doesn't render the page properly. So what we then did is that we deleted the page, which wouldn't render. We created a new one with the exact same name and the exact same content. However, Confluence wasn't smart enough to resolve the incoming links, which effectively made all the incoming links to the page broken. Issue number 3, and I think that's an issue for all writers out there. That's the separation of content and form. I can't stress enough, and I can't tell you how many hours I've spent trying to adjust how wide a table column is. We structure information as technical writers, as information developers. We should not really care about how wide a column is, or do we? Issue number 4, which was hell on earth to anyone who ever had to release stuff, was the manual permission-based release process we had. And actually, that was the biggest issue we had, and that was the biggest motivation to change. Namely, what we did is, whenever a new release was confirmed, we would create the page and put restrictions on it, display restrictions, so that only the tech writers could see it. Then, when the release to customer day came, we would lift those permissions off, effectively showing the page to the public, right? The thing is, it's a great solution if you have 2 writers or 3. When you have 20 writers spread across the globe, not only is this an organizational challenge, but also a huge waste of time. I mean, seriously, who does manual releases? I know for a fact that in this very room, there is a person who does it automatically. I'm talking about you, Łukasz. And this is actually how this is supposed to be done, if you can automate. It was at that time in our relationship with Confluence, we started to notice that we're having the issue effectively prohibit us from working fine. And I've said lots of stuff about Confluence. And you might think that I'm, especially you, sir, who raised your hand, you might think that I'm a hater, that I hate Confluence, that it's the worst piece of software ever. It's not. I think Confluence, it's a great collaboration tool. It's just not so great a documentation tool, at least it wasn't, for the product we were documenting at the time. The thing is, growth of the product had to be accompanied by a change in our processes, by our, I mean the technical writers team, and we didn't really change. So to use the relationship analogy again, we wanted more from life. We wanted to take the relationship to the next step, to the next level, but our partner simply couldn't, our partner didn't let us do it. And it was about time that we noticed that maybe it started looking for alternatives. And we weren't enthusiastic at first. I mean, as with every relationship that's falling apart, you first start to patch things up. At least you try to. So what we did, and for all of you who don't know what scroll versions is, we evaluated the plugin which allows you to do versioning in Confluence. It's called scroll versions. Sadly though, the version we were evaluating was filled with bugs. I mean, the changes weren't propagated to all the versions. It was virtually unusable at the time. So we spent a month evaluating it, and it was, well, time well wasted. We also gave some thought to moving to madcap Flare. However, I'm not really sure why that idea didn't go through. Because it simply died a natural death. It may be because at the time we were already part of the SAP corporate structure, so we heard a great deal about this whole DITA thing. And initially, this ominous four-letter acronym started to look like the solution we just might be looking for. And mostly we have to thank our colleague Bill, and Bill, if you're ever watching this, hi. Bill was a tech writer who worked with DITA prior to joining Hybris or SAP. So it was him who advised us to give DITA, to simply think about it, because DITA has great content reuse, and this was one of our major pain points, let's say. The release process in DITA, it simply takes, I think, 3 clicks of a mouse, so you can call it kind of automated. Moreover, it allows you to apply profiles to the builds, which effectively solved our independent releases problem. However, it wasn't that peachy. I mean, DITA's been around for like, I don't know, 16 years, right? It's not the sexiest way of creating documentation. I think we can all agree on that. And if DITA was a software, it would have a lot of boilerplate code. You know, like the code that's simply there to make the application work. It serves no purpose to you as the user. It's simply there so that the application could run. For DITA, the boilerplate code is maintenance and infrastructure. Luckily, as we were part of the SAP and SAP were already using DITA, it was already there. So after having evaluated those 2 tools I mentioned, namely the Scroll Versions plugin and Madcap Flare, well, not really evaluated, but still, we gave it some thought. We finally decided to give DITA a go, because it really did look like a solution that we were looking for. After many a discussion, after many a WebEx meeting, we finally knew where we're going in terms of roadmap. However, we didn't quite know how to get there, which I think it's a victory in itself. And you might ask how to transform, how to convert 10,000 documents from the wiki to DITA, right? It's quite a challenge. It certainly sounds like one. And actually, I'm not going to tell you. Justyna will.
Thank you. Do you remember your first date? Probably you were nervous. You were excited and you didn't know what to expect. And it was the same with us and DITA. We wanted to move 10,000 documents from Wiki to DITA, but we had no idea how to do this. We were nervous because we heard about cloning, versioning, about reuse, but we didn't know if it fits our needs. Fortunately, we had our good uncle Bill. He created a script that moved our documents automatically. Thank you, Uncle Bill. So let's have this example. This is an example page created on Wiki. As you can see, there is a title, some sections, an image, link, code block. You can also find some bold text inside. So this document first was downloaded as HTML file. Then we put it to Bill's script, and this script took all HTML tags and replaced it with XML tags. This is what we got. Not really human readable, I think. Of course, we can find some tags, but it was not really good to read it. Fortunately, DITA CMS provides author mode. This looks like that. And here you can see that we are missing short description, that we are missing an image. We had to upload all images manually, and then we had to put them in a proper place in the documentation. The same was for links. And also, you can find here some B tags. B tags are not welcome in DITA documentation. We had to change them for emphasis, or for some methods or classes, we had to change them for APA name tags. We were spending about 2 months on cleaning up our documentation, and we realized that we don't have much time for our other duties. So we decided to hire an intern, and he helped us with cleaning the documentation. Wojtek was really helpful, and now he works with us as a regular employee. As I mentioned before, we were really nervous when we thought about DITA. Fortunately, we had 3 days training. We gained some experience while cleaning up the documentation on DITA, and we chosen one power user that had more privileges on DITA to support other technical writers. And you know what? We realized that DITA is awesome and that she meets our needs. For some time, we hang out with 2 tools, with Wiki and DITA. But there was one day that we had to decide that we stop using Wiki. So we decided to create all new documents only on DITA, and also we decided to give a priority in cleaning up to the documents that are going to be released with the next release. DITA can be accessed only by technical writers. And now imagine developers that usually are really reluctant to provide documentation input, that they say that documentation is boring and nobody reads it. Now they wanted to learn DITA. They wanted to learn about tags, and they wanted to have access to it. We had many fights, many discussions with them. We had to convince them that the good documentation is provided only by technical writers. After some time, we won. And this is the output page, our converted page from Wiki to DITA. I think that it looks pretty cool. Okay, so we converted from Wiki to DITA, we cleaned up our documentation, and now we wanted to have good search in our documentation. So we asked our developers to provide a script that indexes all our documentation, and we put it on Solar server. Thanks to that, now DITA knows better, Solar server knows better what the user is looking for. And about everyday issues that we have with DITA, Basia will tell you more.
Hello. So let's go to the everyday life issues that we had. And since we are talking about relationships, let's just stick to it for a bit. So we were very happy after the conversion and all. We wanted to share our happiness with the people. We started working with DITA CMS, but then, boom, reality kicks in. And the everyday life issues. So although there are more of them, that's for sure, we've identified 4 main areas of our concerns. Let's start with finding the proper connection. So it's like finding the way to the other person's heart, you know, like with the food and all. Well, food didn't work for us, but I tell you what did, the remote desktop. So once you are connected, you just need to talk to her. With DITA, you do it in a structured way. And remember to use a map. Then, when you have you have your documentation structured and all, there's this waiting game. It's like, you know, waiting for your girlfriend until she finishes with the makeup before you go to this fancy restaurant, right? So it's the same with DITA build, basically. Just wait for it for 24 hours. But, you know, you have to be patient because you will be rewarded. And last but not least, you are very happy with your girl, right? So you want to introduce her to your friends. And well, but they know that you actually hang out with the other one for like 5 years, so they are a little bit skeptical. You need to convince them. So it's all about the first impressions and the first collaborations. All right, let's go to the connection factor. So finding the connection isn't always easy, as I said, and especially if it also includes some technical issues, right? So for us, with DITA CMS, especially for Mac users, yeah, it was like we needed this app, the Microsoft Remote Desktop, to basically connect to the server to launch DITA CMS. Easy, 3 steps. And for us, it was a bit of a shock because with Confluence, as you know, it's just like you log in, and then you can write your documentation. It's easy. That's it. But we needed to go deeper with DITA. But at first, we thought that it will be slow, it will like slow down our work, but actually with time we accelerated, thanks to the SAP infrastructure and the helpful guys that helped us a lot with the servers and with DITA CMS, and now it's pretty fast, although we still need to log in via 2 remote desktops. But I know that the help is on the way, so yeah, we are pleased with that. So once you are connected, let's talk about structure. As you know, with DITA CMS, you need a map. And then you've got your topics in it, be it a concept, be it a task, or the reference. And then you add your content to it. And by content, I mean sections, steps, tags, images, whatever you need in it. So as you can see, it's all structured. I'm not saying that Confluence documentation isn't structured, but in DITA, you can see the really clear structure in it. For us, after the conversion, we were like, topics, just topics everywhere, because when we converted, we didn't have the possibility to indicate whether we want the topic to be a reference or a task, so we ended up with topics. And it wasn't just that. We also had these pretty long topics because in Confluence, you can have the table of contents at the top of your page, so it's easy for the users to navigate through, right? But in DITA, unless you use smaller units of documentation, you end up with pretty longish documentation. So that was the second thing. No table of contents. And random tags here and there. Justyna mentioned the B tags, right? But we ended up with too many tags that weren't rendered properly by the DITA CMS output. So this all led to unclear structure, inconsistent output, and frustration with the constant scrolling, right? So what we did about it? To reinstate our structure, we started with investigation and cleaning up. So we had this initial cleanup, but that wasn't enough. So we had to investigate the topics, the tags, the images, and and do something about it. But it's not really easy when you've got like 20 plus writers working on the same thing. So what we did is we divided the technical writers into several committees, like the committee dealing with style, with the graphics, with the templates for DITA CMS. We had a lot of meetings together, and it actually worked pretty well. So one of our ideas, for example, was to introduce regular publishing intervals, like every week or every 2 weeks, so that we can have our documentation improved every week. So it's getting clearer and clearer with every publishing interval. And then all of these actually contributed to change in our mindset. So we learned how to create the documentation right from the start, properly, well-structured. We learned how to work in a team to achieve a success. Yeah. So we've got our documentation structured, it's cool, and we want to show it to the world, right? So in Confluence, again, it's very easy because you just save it, and then you can just share the link with the developer or the product owner and just tell your fellow developers, just please gaze upon my documentation, it's astonishing. But with DITA, not so easy. You write, Then you release, so the document comes back to the content management system. And then you wait for 24 hours for the build to be put together and generated. And then the build arrives, and you are very happy, and you can share your documentation. For us, we just had to be patient about it. We just had to move our thinking about the documentation and the release process from the Wiki to DITA CMS. And we learned how to structure our documentation right from the start. We used some tips and tricks. So for example, we removed all the tags to see more or less how the structure looks like. Or we used the generate output button that allows you to generate documentation ad hoc, so you can see how it looks like. It isn't perfect, but it's like enough for the developers to be satisfied with it. Of course, thinking ahead and planning the work in advance just helps. Right, and then we go to the meeting my new tool part. So, as I said, we've got our documentation, it's there, it's generated. We want to share it with our developers. And we were very enthusiastic about DITA CMS. And, well, so while we were so enthusiastic, the developers were like, oh no, I'm not gonna use it, because they were like, well, it's not a collaboration tool, right? We don't have access to it. We've got like problems with providing the input. How is it gonna work while we are providing the input in the wiki and then you are just taking it and putting it in DITA CMS? Oh no, that's not gonna work. But we had to convince them because there was no turning back. So how we did that? We actually kept them informed. So we held some meetings with the developers, we talked to them, we showed them the benefits that it brings to us and to our customers and partners. So, for example, the better search, the reuse that I mentioned, the structured documentation. And, well, so then the developers actually understood that it's better for us. And then they, after some time, after we worked with DITA, they even told us that, for example, the search is very good compared to what they had in Confluence. So that worked well. We showed them the tools because even if we are not using DITA CMS, it's not that the developers cannot use it. That the developers cannot use the Confluence, right? So they use Confluence, they use Jira, or any other tools that help them to provide us with the input. And last but not least, you just have to talk to them, right? So you just approach your developer, talk to him, draw some diagrams together. It might be fun. So yeah, I think that we will have more problems in the future, that's for sure. But with a dedicated team, and I'm speaking now about the technical writers and the developers, I think that you can achieve almost everything. So to wrap it up, let us answer some questions that maybe some might have crossed your mind while we were doing this presentation. So first of all, was DITA the best choice for us? Well, yeah, for us it was a pretty good choice. It was a logical choice because we had this infrastructure in place. We needed a tool that supports us with good reuse, good search, well-structured documentation, and DITA gave it all to us.
Can I do it by myself? Absolutely not. It took 20 people in our company and one DITA expert to convert from Wiki to DITA. Even if you have about 100 documents and you would like to convert to DITA, remember that it takes time, that you need to change your mindset, the mindset of your developers. So maybe you would like to consider other tool than DITA.
And the final question, would you do it again? I mean, considering the amount of manpower we put into this, the amount of effort we put into this, the long hours at the office, the endless calls, discussions, WebExes and stuff, I would absolutely do it again. And actually, here's why. We moved to DITA mostly for our own selfish reasons, right? It was us, the documentation team, who were dissatisfied with the way Confluence handles documentation. It turns out that after having resolved our issues, we also did manage to resolve the issues of our target audience. And I'm not just saying that in terms of providing them with search which actually works and with versioning, but also what we didn't realize in the beginning is that we thought this would only be a change of tool. Simple, like, you know, reinstalling software. It turned out to be much more than that. It turned out to be a change of a mindset. Our writing has become better, to put it simply, more structured, and our audience saw that. The feedback we received was extremely positive. And I think the other important thing that we gained back when we switched to DITA is actually the satisfaction that we can actually help our users one document at a time. And you don't really have that satisfaction when you're struggling with your tool on an everyday basis. So if you guys are unhappy and dissatisfied with the relationship you're having with your documentation tool, change it. It doesn't have to be DITA. Simply change it, because it's really about time that you started to enjoy life again. Thank you very much. Questions? No questions?
Okay, questions. We have questions here.
Why did you hang out with Confluence at all?
Come again?
Why did you hang out with Confluence at all?
Because it was there. Yeah, I mean, when I joined the company, which was about 5 years ago, it was enough. Confluence satisfied all of our documentation needs. Over time, well, things started to change.
Well, I'm curious to know, why do you have to wait 24 hours to get your content built?
I think, I mean, maybe it has changed because I'm not with SAP anymore. Right now, I'm representing Braintribe Austria. But okay, so it didn't change. I think it was because of the fact that SAP had so many teams working with DITA that it was simply a procedure they put in place not to overload the server. But it's an educated guess. I don't really know.
Okay, thanks.
I will tell you something more. So we don't have servers that continuously deliver our builds, our documentation, so we have to wait for it 24 hours. But of course, as Basia mentioned on her presentation, we have this generate output. We can always use it. Of course, it's not so cool as output that we get on servers, but still, it's enough.
And actually, we are planning to have our own server, so I think that the things will improve. Now, it's just like it's the 24 hours because there are so many builds that are put in the queue that we just have to wait for our turn. So that's why we have to wait that long.
I know we had more questions, at least, yeah.
I would just like to disagree with one comment. Can you do it by yourself? Yes, it is possible. Our small company, about 700 topics, migration from Confluence to DITA done manually, only one technical writer, 2.5 months, a lot of positive change, really a lot of positive change. I definitely recommend it to everyone.
Cool. So you basically you got our point. The thing is, we didn't have 700 topics. We had 10,000. Yep. So, and like you said, it was a 2.5 months of work, right? When we decided to switch to DITA, we also had to deliver documentation to our team. So we couldn't really focus on it 100%. But if you did it, well, kudos to you. Seriously, respect.
But with smaller teams, it is possible to do even manually, and it's definitely worth it.
Hats off to you, sir.
Anyone else?
So when I listened to you, I felt as if I was listening to the story of Motorola Solutions team like 5 years ago. The difference is that our uncle Bill was Paweł Kowaluk. And the difference is that one thing, a good thing was that we didn't end up with only topics, but Paweł managed to do it to get topics, tasks, references, and so on. And I need to say that it was like very, very actually the same what I heard from you. And the only thing I want to say is that the best fun is still ahead of you, and it's called reuse. So good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we have time for one more question. Okay, let's make it two. The last two questions.
Okay, you say something about that you have to run some Solr server for the search engine. It was really needed. DITA don't have any engine for search of the content, or?
DITA is a documentation management tool, so it doesn't have it.
It also a CMS, so it should, I think. The question was that, is this really needed to have some Solr server on our sites?
The thing is, we hosted our documentation, we created our own server, so we wanted to have a dedicated Solr instance just to search, so that we would be in charge of what type of heads you get, what search suggestions you get, and what content is boosted. So I'm sure you can do it without a dedicated Solr, not on DITA CMS, I think, on the solution we're using, but I would strongly advise you to do it, because it's not difficult to set up.
Yeah,
the return on investment is...
I know the Solr servers, so I work with it, but the question was, it is needed.
For us,
it is recommended, you said, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, it was needed, because we didn't have an option to host our content.
Okay.
We got the build ready-made with CSS and all, but then it was up to us to decide where to host it.
Okay, let's make this one the last quick one. Okay.
Okay, real quick. Obviously, you guys pointed out what the drawbacks of Confluence are, and I think there's a lot of people in the room that agree with it. One thing I did always like about working with Confluence, though, is that it's very good to collaborate with other people outside of the team, because it's open to everyone. They can immediately go in.
Absolutely.
How did you solve that now in DITA? Because when I was working in XML, it was very cumbersome to give someone for review, get their feedback. You spend a lot of time doing silly copy and pasting, which is error-prone and annoying. I'm just wondering if you found a effective solution to kind of mimic what Confluence offers.
So actually, we still use Confluence as our internal tool, so that's one thing. So for example, for providing input. And for the review, we have the user assistance platform that the generated documentation is hosted on, and it's provided with the commenting features. So once the documentation is generated, we can send the link to, for example, our developers, and they can just quickly comment on it. So that's how we do it. We use both Confluence or any other tool, like for the input, and then we use the UACP platform for the output and commenting.
Okay, thank you everyone. If you guys still have some questions, all of them will be waiting for you after the coffee break in our Soapy Pinky Corner, so you can talk to them and during the whole conference. Let's now go for the break. Thank you.